They are in control, because no matter what you do, no matter how hard you try, you cannot make them eat, you can't make them sleep, and you cannot make them potty. They are totally in charge of those things, and they know it. So those are the perfect opportunities for them to dig in their heels and say, you may think you're the boss of me, but you're not. Kids will get their power one way or another. Now, as they get a little bit older, the power struggle changes. It becomes the back talk and the attitude, the sassiness, or they battle us over things that we care a lot about, and kids have gotten the memo that we parents care a lot about homework and chores. So that is the perfect opportunity for them to dig in their heels and say, you may think you're the boss of me, but you're not. Their words may not say that, but their behavior absolutely does. Kids will get their power one way or another, and it comes back to this concept we talked about earlier. Kids continue doing what works for them. If the behavior gets a hit of power, they're going to keep using it. Now, let me talk about that. A hit of power. What does that mean? Well, if their behavior makes you feel frustrated, bent out of shape, angry, it ruffles your feathers and gets under your skin, that is a huge hit of power for your kids. Because imagine what it's like to get a grown-up adult all bent out of shape. That's a huge power rush. And if your kids feel that power rush, they're going to keep using that behavior again and again. So our job is to make that behavior not work for them so they don't keep using it. And we're going to talk about how to do that. What we have to remember is this. The misbehavior is not the problem. It's a symptom. It's a symptom of a deeper issue. So when your kids are acting out with all of those misbehaviors that you wrote down in your registration forms, if you could just imagine that your child is wearing a big sign around her neck and it says, hey, mom and dad, I want to belong, I want to feel significant, but I don't know how to do it. I want your attention, I want to have power, but I don't know what else to do. So I'm just going to go about these annoying attention-seeking behaviors and I'm going to get my power any way I have to. Now, of course, they don't even realize that and they can't articulate that, so they just go about these behaviors that make us crazy. So that's what we have to learn to deal with. Now, let me ask you a question. I want to just find out, I want to do sort of a pulse and temperature check. Is this resonating with you? To the left side of your screen, there is a feedback button with a drop-down menu. If this concept of belonging and significance makes sense, click on I agree, all right, with a thumbs up. If not, tell me you disagree. So just kind of tell me how you're feeling about that. Okay, I'm seeing lots of thumbs up so far. All right, good. I'm going to keep on going. So let me ask you this question. Where do your kids need a boost? All right, do your kids need a boost in the belonging department, significance, or both? All right, tell me about that. And Deborah, this applies to teenagers, absolutely, just like it does for toddlers. All right, everything I'm going to talk about here tonight is toddlers all the way up to teenagers. So everybody take a minute and weigh in on that if you would. Okay, I'm seeing that all but about 5% of you, about 95% of you, say that your kids need a boost on the significance side or both. And I think that's very common, that we had the exact same results with our group this morning. I think in large part because we as parents don't understand or recognize our kids' need for power, all right? And Diane, the difference is the belonging is more the attention-seeking, emotional connection. Significance is the power, you're not the boss of me kind of behaviors. So for most of us, we don't understand our kids' need for power. I certainly didn't. And when I was having power struggle after power struggle, that was a huge aha to me. The other thing that comes into the mix here is personality. And we often talk about our kids' personalities, but we have to consider our personalities as well and how our personalities affect behavior. One of the things that we have parents do in our program is go through a parent personality assessment, so you can uncover how your personality affects your child's behavior. So I'll use myself as an example. When I go through the parent personality assessment, I am just off the charts on the controlling end of the spectrum. So I tend to invite power struggles from my kids, which when you think about it, it makes total sense. Because the more I try to control things and want things done my way or the highway, the more I order, correct, and direct, which is actually my comfort zone, the more I boss them around, their natural reaction is to fight back. It's a basic fight or flight response. And our kids can't flee, so their only choice is to fight back. And so when I was having power struggle after power struggle, I was creating most of the problem. Now, your personality may invite power struggles like mine does, or you might invite helplessness or other behaviors. But once you understand how your personality contributes to the misbehavior, it is, that, like I said, it's a huge light bulb moment, because then you can use different strategies from the toolbox instead. But there is a tendency to believe that when kids misbehave, we need to fix the kids. But we play an equal role in that. So understanding our part is a big part of it. Anyway, I'll give you more information on that a little bit down the road towards the end of the webinar. Okay, so thanks everybody for weighing in on that. I'm kind of putting you to work tonight, aren't I? All right, so let's get into some strategies. I want to share a discipline strategy with you in a minute, but I do want to be clear that discipline and punishment are not the same thing. So from a positive discipline perspective, we would define punishment as any strategy that would involve blame, shame, or pain. That could be physical, or that could be emotional. Yelling, criticizing, humiliating. Any of those strategies that involve blame, shame, or pain would be considered punishment, and I'm going to advise you to not use them for several important reasons. The first one is that when a child, or an adult for that matter, is experiencing blame, shame, and pain, their immediate response is to shut down. So that lesson is not getting through. When they are experiencing blame, shame, and pain, they're basically in a self-protection mode, protecting themselves from more blame, shame, and pain. The other thing that happens with blame, shame, and pain punishment is that it encourages lying. And again, when you think about it from the child's perspective, lying is a perfectly reasonable response if they know that blame, shame, and pain is coming down the pike. Of course they're going to lie to get out of it. So for so many reasons, it's just not effective for long-term behavior change. You may get some short-term hits, but that long-term behavior change is not happening with punishment. Now, that's not to say that we don't hold kids accountable for their behavior. We absolutely do, but it doesn't have to involve blame, shame, and pain. And I think Jane Nelson says it best of all. She is a renowned positive discipline educator and author, and she says, where did we ever get the crazy idea that in order to make children do better, first we have to make them feel worse? Why would we ever think that? If you think about your own experience, if you had a boss or a spouse who made you feel bad about yourself, exposed you to blame, shame, and pain, you wouldn't feel inspired. You would just think that that was not a very nice person that you certainly didn't want to open up to. And that's exactly what happens with our kids. Now, let me get to, let's see, Kimberly's question, timeout. Timeout, Kimberly, is certainly better than some of the more blame, shame, and pain strategies. However, what you'll see in a bit is that timeout is just not that effective for long-term behavior change. Because what happens if you have a strong-willed child, timeout will tend to escalate the power struggle. And if you've ever watched the nanny shows on TV, you'll see this played out week after week, where the child misbehaves, the nanny takes the child to the naughty chair or the timeout corner or the step or whatever it is, sets him there for 5 minutes. As she walks away, the child, walk away 5 seconds, and that child is up out of the chair running around the house. And so then she has to drag him back to the naughty chair, explain to him again why he's there, give him another minute on his sentence, and this whole thing goes on and on. That's what very often happens with children who are strong-willed. They view timeout as a challenge. So then it becomes your job to keep the child in timeout, and their mission in life is to get out of timeout. So they're not learning the lesson that you want them to learn. And that's why parents will say that they do timeout over and over and over again, because it's not working. The other question that parents will often ask is, well, Amy, should I hold the door shut to keep her in timeout? Well, if that's what you're doing, it's not really working. It's just a big old power struggle. So there are just more effective strategies that you can use instead of timeout, and I'm going to share one of those with you right now. And this strategy will work even for the most strong-willed child. So I want to share one of the strategies from the toolbox. The toolbox is a collection of strategies or positive discipline tools that we teach to parents in our program. The one that I want to talk to you about tonight is consequences. And I want to share the formula for the 5 R's of consequences. Anytime you are dealing with consequences, it must include the 5 R's, because if it doesn't, it's going to feel like punishment to your kids. And this formula is going to be appropriate for kids around the age of 2.5 or above. I say around 2.5 because they have to be verbal enough to go through the process that I'm going to explain, and they have to understand basic cause and effect. If they're younger than that, or not quite at that development level, then we would use a different set of tools from the toolbox. But for purposes of this tool, we're looking at around 2.5 and above. So anytime we're dealing with consequences, we want to make sure they include the 5 R's. So Sarah, 2.5 and above, this is going to work all the way up to teenagers. Now, what I'm going to encourage you to do now is to just sort of sit back with your note-taking guide, take in all this information that I'm going to share with you about the 5 R's, and then I'm going to give you an example. And then I'll get to some questions about how to apply it in other situations, okay? So the 5 R's are as follows. The first one is that it needs to be respectful. Anything that would involve blame, shame, and pain would not have a place here. It has to be respectful to the child and respectful to the adult. The other big piece here is that we, as the parent, have to use a calm and respectful voice. And that can be really hard to do when you're angry and frustrated. So the lesson here is that if you are angry and frustrated, please don't deal with it in that moment. 99.9% of stuff does not have to be dealt with in that moment. You can wait 15 or 20 minutes and say, you know what, sweetie, I need to talk to you about what happened just a little while ago with your brother. So do not have the conversation unless you can do it in a calm and respectful way, because if what I call my big ugly mom voice comes out, guess what? They're shutting down. That wall goes up, and that lesson is not getting through. So it's a big waste of your breath and your time. So wait until you can have a calm and respectful conversation. The second R is that the consequence must be related to the misbehavior. Put a big star beside this one, because it's the one that parents most often miss the boat on. So it has to be related to the misbehavior so that that learning event takes place. That connection is made in their little brains. So the related consequence for not wearing a bike helmet is you don't get to ride your bike. The related consequence for not brushing your teeth is you don't get to eat sweets or goldfish or crackers or pretzels or drink soda or anything else that's going to turn to sugar on your teeth. Because guess what? I can't force you to brush your teeth, at least not without a giant power struggle. However, we'll have to change your diet. So anything that can turn to sugar on your teeth is going to be off limits. So it's totally up to you. I'm fine either way. All right? So again, we're not forcing her to brush her teeth, but we're giving her the power to choose. And by the way, a day or two of strictly vegetables and protein will get her brushing her teeth pretty quickly. If you miss curfew, you don't get to go with your friends the following weekend, and if you don't turn off the video game when I ask, well then you're going to lose your video privileges. It's related, it makes sense. All right, so it has to be respectful, it has to be related to the misbehavior. The third R is that it needs to be reasonable. Reasonable. Consequences don't have to be crazy, excessively harsh. We don't have to ground them for life. A 4-year-old who's throwing puzzle pieces around the room, we would pack away the puzzle for a day. For a 14-year-old who's texting at the dinner table, she would lose her phone privileges for a week. Just keep it reasonable. So we have respectful, related to the misbehavior, reasonable in duration. All right, guys, and again, I'm going to just encourage you to take these R's in for a minute, and I'll get to the questions in a bit. The fourth R, I want you to really pay attention to. I think it's the make or break R. All right, the fourth R is that the consequence must be revealed in advance. So your child has the opportunity to make a choice between the appropriate behavior and the consequence. When we reveal that consequence in advance, then she has the power. All the power is in her hands. She decides whether or not she gets the consequence. So we want to reveal the consequence in advance. However, we want to close the loop with the fifth R, which is having them repeat back to you. So just so we're on the same page, Jill, can you repeat back to me what our rule is and what the consequence would be if you choose not to follow the rule? Once Jill repeats back to me, then we have a verbal agreement. Everybody's on the same page. I know that she knows what I expect, and we're all on the same page. Now, this process will work with very young ones with very simple words, all the way up to the teenagers. All right? So we have respectful, related to the misbehavior, reasonable in duration, revealed in advance, and repeated back to you. All right? So let me go through an example of how this would work. All right? And Katie, no, it's not a threat. It's a perfectly logical, respectful, and related consequence. All right? If you can't take care of the puzzle pieces, the puzzle goes away. That's the perfectly reasonable, respectful consequence. All right, so let me give you an example. I'm going to use video games as the example because younger kids, all the way up to older kids, play video games or watch TV, but very often when you want them to turn it off, they either don't listen or it turns into a big power struggle. If video games isn't your deal, you're going to just substitute whatever other issue you have going on in your house. But what I want to do is kind of give you a script for how this would work for revealing the consequences in advance. So again, sit back, take this all in, take notes on the script, and don't worry about the other misbehaviors right now. So let's assume that we've been having an issue with video games. It's driving you crazy, and you're tired of repeating, reminding, nagging, and yelling. So that means it's time for you to reveal the consequences. So sometime when everybody is in a calm and happy place, you're going to have a little conversation at a time when you're not angry, they're not upset. You're just going to lay out what the consequences would be. So you would start out by saying, you know, guys, I've noticed that we've been having a little bit of an issue with video games lately. It seems like when I ask you to turn off the video game, either you ignore my request or there's a whole lot of grumbling and groaning. And you know, that's not okay because, of course, having video games is a privilege and there are responsibilities that go along with that. So I very calmly stated what I was concerned about. And I started that sentence with, you know, I've noticed